The look on Karen's face when I told her, "This is my private land," was priceless. One moment she was barking orders at my guests like she owned the lake, and the next, her jaw nearly hit the dock. She froze, because her entire scam had just crumbled in public. The July sun shimmered across Crystal Lake like liquid glass. My friends lounged on the dock, drinks in hand, laughter echoing across the water. Children splashed near the shoreline, and the smell of burgers on the grill filled the air. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Then came the sharp click, click, click of heels striking the dock. Karen. She strode forward with all the pomp of a queen surveying her kingdom. Clipboard clutched under one arm, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose. Her crisp tennis whites gleamed in the sun, and the smirk tugging at her lips told me exactly what she was about to do. Ruin everyone's fun. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice cutting through the music like a siren. "Who authorized this gathering? This lake is community property and parties require approval from the HOA. You're in violation of our standards." The dock fell silent. My friends exchanged nervous looks. Some shifted uncomfortably, beginning to fold their chairs and gather their belongings. Karen had that effect. Her presence was enough to make grown adults scatter. I stepped forward, refusing to flinch under her glare. "Karen, this isn't community property," I said calmly. She laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Don't play games with me. I'm the HOA president. I know the rules and I enforce them. Your grandfather may have let this nonsense slide, but I won't. These waters belong to the community, and I expect compliance." Her words dripped with arrogance. My guests looked mortified, ready to leave. That was it. Enough was enough. I squared my shoulders, raised my voice, and said for everyone to hear, "This is my private land." The dock went dead silent. Karen's smirk evaporated. She froze, clipboard trembling in her hand, eyes darting between me and the crowd of neighbors now gathering along the shore. It was a beautiful moment, but as I would soon learn, it was only the beginning. Karen wasn't the kind of person who backed down. If anything, she was about to double down, and the storm that followed nearly destroyed everything I inherited. 6 months earlier, my life couldn't have been more different. I was living in Phoenix, stuck in a dead-end civil engineering job that drained the life out of me. My marriage had just crumbled after years of trying to patch holes in a sinking ship. The desert heat pressed on me day and night, and I felt like I was suffocating in a life I never really wanted. Then came the call. My grandfather, Ezra, had passed away. He was more than family. He was a legend in our small Wisconsin town of Millbrook. People called him the Lake Guardian. He owned acres of forest, shoreline, and the lake itself, and for 60 years he treated it as if it belonged to everyone. He hosted free fish fries, let kids swim off his dock, and loaned out boats without ever asking for a dime. When the lawyer told me Grandpa had left everything to me, his entire estate, including Crystal Lake, I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Me? The broken divorcee with nothing but bad memories in Phoenix? Suddenly, I owned paradise. The first time I returned to the estate, it felt like stepping back into childhood. The main house stood tall against the pines, the dock stretched out over clear water, and the smell of pine needles and lake air hit me like a memory. I remembered summers fishing with Grandpa, the creak of dock planks under bare feet, and the warmth of his voice explaining water rights like they were bedtime stories. That's when I met her, Karen Hutchinson, self-proclaimed Community Standards Director, a title I later learned she invented herself. She moved in 3 years earlier from Minneapolis, bringing with her a BMW SUV, a taste for expensive perfume, and an obsession with rules. She wasn't elected by anyone, but she acted like the queen of Millbrook Shores. The first time she knocked on my door, She was armed with a clipboard and a smile that felt like a threat. "We need to discuss your grandfather's arrangements with the community," she said sweetly. "I'm sure you'll want to continue his tradition of cooperation. There are standards to maintain." At first I thought she was just a little eccentric, but I had no idea how deep her schemes ran, or how far she'd go to convince everyone that my inheritance wasn't really mine. It started small. A warning about my mailbox height, a note about community lawn guidelines, a laminated violation notice taped to my door after a few friends parked on the grass. Each time I brushed it off. Surely she couldn't enforce any of this. I owned the property, right? But Karen thrived on fear. Neighbors whispered about her fines, her threats, and her endless lectures about property values. Some even told me they were paying her lake maintenance fees of $200 a month. At first I thought they were joking, but no. Karen had convinced them it was required. The turning point came during my first barbecue. I invited a few old college friends. We grilled, swam, and laughed just like Grandpa used to do, and right on cue at 2 p.m., Karen stormed onto the dock with laminated notices in hand. "This is unauthorized use of community resources," she declared. "I need the full guest list immediately. Your grandfather always respected boundaries." My friends exchanged nervous looks. One by one, they started packing up. The laughter died, the burgers went cold, and I stood there fuming as Karen smirked like she'd won. That night, I sat alone on the dock, staring at the lake. For the first time, I felt like I'd failed Grandpa's memory. But what Karen didn't know, what even I didn't know yet, was that Grandpa had left me more than property. He had left me the tools to fight back, and once I found them, Karen's empire of lies would start to crumble. One stormy evening, I wandered into Grandpa's study. Dust clung to the shelves, and the smell of old leather and pipe tobacco lingered in the air. As I traced my fingers along the spines of his books, something unusual caught my eye. A panel in the wall, slightly misaligned. I pressed it, and with a soft click, it swung open. Inside was a cedar chest. My heart pounded as I pulled it into the light. Inside, wrapped in protective covers, were deeds, surveyor maps, and water rights documents stretching back to the 1920s. One paper made my hands shake with excitement. Crystal Lake Water Rights Grant, 1923. Signed, notarized, filed with the county. It stated in black and white that my family held exclusive ownership of the entire lake. I sat back in the leather chair, stunned. Karen wasn't just overstepping, she was running a scam. For years, she'd bullied neighbors into paying fees for something she had no legal claim to. The next morning, I marched into the county courthouse. The clerk, Sandra, helped me dig through the records. Every document confirmed the same truth. Crystal Lake was privately owned. No HOA had ever been filed. Karen's house deed showed she had 0 shoreline rights. I left the courthouse that day with a folder full of evidence and a fire in my chest. Karen thought she could bully me like she bullied everyone else, but she had just picked the wrong person. When Karen realized intimidation wouldn't work on me, she escalated. One morning, I found an official-looking cease and desist letter under my windshield. It claimed the Millbrook Shores HOA had exclusive recreational rights to the lake. Daily fines of $500, it warned, would apply if I continued unauthorized use. The letter looked convincing, until I noticed the address was a P.O. box. No real law firm works out of a P.O. box. I laughed bitterly. But as I dug deeper, neighbors revealed an even darker truth. Karen had been collecting thousands in fees for 2 years. Families paid because they thought it was legitimate. One elderly neighbor told me she forked over $10,400 last year alone. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was running a racket, but the more I pushed back, the more desperate she became. Fake safety complaints, rumors spread at the local store, even claims that I was an outsider planning to fence off the entire shoreline. It was psychological warfare, and Karen was playing dirty. But I had the deeds, the truth, and soon I'd have the entire community on my side. Karen organized a community meeting at the town center. Flyers plastered on doors invited residents to discuss lake safety concerns. Of course, my invite mysteriously got lost. I showed up anyway. The room was packed. 40 residents in folding chairs, donuts and coffee on the table, and Karen at the front with a projector. She clicked through slides of overcrowded docks and declining property values. "We need professional management," she declared. Without it, lawsuits could bankrupt this community. Murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd. That's when I stood. "Mrs. Hutchinson, fascinating presentation," I said, holding up my folder. "But could you explain what legal authority grants you management rights over Crystal Lake?" Silence. I handed copies of the deeds to the front row. The room buzzed as people read 1923 Water Rights Grant, 1963 Surveys, County Filings, Proof. Karen's face flushed red. She stammered about verbal agreements and community. Traditions. Then she made her fatal mistake, admitting she had collected $8,200 in fees for lake maintenance. The crowd erupted. "Wait, we've been paying for what?" One man shouted, "You told us this was legally required." Another woman accused. Karen grabbed her laptop and bolted from the room. But the damage was done. The crowd had seen the truth, and for the first time, the community was beginning to see through her lies. After the disaster at the community meeting, Karen's control began slipping. But instead of backing down, she came back swinging harder than ever. First, she filed bogus complaints with the township, claiming my dock was unsafe, that my guests were creating public hazards, and that my shoreline lacked proper lighting. Each complaint was laughable, but they forced township officers to come inspect, wasting everyone's time. Then came the signs. One morning, I walked out to see freshly staked boards hammered into the sand. "Private property, no swimming, by order of Millbrook Township." The problem? They weren't from the township at all. They were fakes, printed at some office shop and laminated to look official. Neighbors started whispering that I was planning to ban children from swimming. Parents looked at me with suspicion. The Hendersons' little girl even tugged at my sleeve one afternoon and asked, tears in her eyes, "Mr. Marcus, are you really going to stop us from playing in the lake?" That one hurt, but Karen wasn't finished. She unleashed a smear campaign on social media. On the town's Facebook group, she posted cropped photos of me removing her fake signs, twisting them to look like I was tearing down safety notices. She called me the outsider millionaire, claiming I was turning the lake into a private resort. Some people believed her. A few even unfriended me in town. But others, people like Dorothy and Jim, saw through the lies. They reminded me of something important. Every scammer eventually overplays their hand. And Karen? She was about to overplay hers in spectacular fashion. By July, I was done playing defense. With the help of Grandpa's Conservation Trust, I organized the Crystal Lake Heritage Festival. Free boat rides, environmental lessons for kids, food trucks, music, everything Karen had promised, but real, legal, and open to all. The festival drew over 200 people. Families swam, kids laughed. The smell of grilling burgers filled the air. News crews showed up. For the first time, the lake felt like it belonged to the community again. That's when Karen stormed in. She marched across the grounds in blinding white tennis gear, clipboard in one hand, laminated badge in the other. Her voice cut through the crowd. "This gathering is unauthorized. As HOA president, I am shutting this down immediately." The crowd fell silent, eyes on me. My heart thumped, but I stayed calm. I handed her a folder filled with township permits, insurance policies, and conservation trust documents. "Everything is filed legally," I said, smiling. "But can you show us your credentials?" She waved her fake HOA certificate in the air. Phones came out instantly, recording her lies. The news cameras zoomed in. I stepped to the mic and projected the deeds and trust documents on the big screen. Federal agents in attendance nodded in confirmation. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the truth spread. Karen had no authority, no ownership, and no right to collect a dime. Then came the moment of poetic justice. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez stepped forward, flanked by FBI agents. "Ma'am," he said, "you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and obstruction of federal investigation." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed louder than any fireworks. Karen's face drained of color as she was led away in front of the entire town. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. The weeks that followed were like waking up from a nightmare. Karen pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. Part of her deal required her to repay $47,000 in restitution to the families she scammed. One by one, neighbors lined up at the township hall to receive refund checks. Some cried as they realized the nightmare was finally over. Dorothy squeezed my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "Your grandfather would be so proud. You turned her lies into something good." With Karen gone, the community pulled together. The Conservation Trust funded real improvements. ADA-compliant docks, safety lighting, environmental workshops for kids. The festival became an annual tradition, drawing hundreds. Instead of dividing us, Karen's scam had made us stronger. As for me, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I stayed in Millbrook permanently, running conservation programs, serving on the township board, even finding love again with Sarah, who ran the local restaurant. Grandpa always said the lake didn't belong to one person. It belonged to everyone willing to care for it. He was right. Karen thought she could bully me, scam my neighbors, and steal my family's legacy. Instead, she exposed herself and united the community against her. Lies, the best revenge against fraud, isn't just winning, it's building something better than they ever could. Have you ever dealt with an HOA, nightmare, or a neighbor like Karen? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell because I've got plenty more stories where this came from. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it arrives in handcuffs.